Welcome to Commuteless, a show about working from home with less stress and more freedom so you can live life on your terms. My name is Kyle Adams, and I'm joined by my co-host, Corey Miller.
Hello.
And we're just going to dive into things today, Corey, and talk about a few things that I think are really important for working remote or from home. And I want to look at this in a high level. So these are all things that we could dive into and probably talk about for hours on end. But I really just want to kind of give a high level overview of what does it look like to work from home and how can you structure that in a way that's helpful for you to get things done and not like lose all of that productivity you could have in an office.
Yeah, makes sense. I think there's, whenever it comes to these types of shows that are a little bit more high level, I'm excited to kind of figure out what are the things we can pull out of it to make future episodes about that are way more specific, because there's a lot of specificity that and a lot of nuance I think that can get lost when talking about it from a high level. But if you only go at a nuanced level, I think there are some other things that can be missed as well. So I'm excited to jump into it for sure.
Definitely. I think it's important too for us to just give kind of a frame of reference for what our situation looks like in life, because I know everyone's in a different place. You might be single, you might be married without children, or you might be married with children. And so that can play into these things as well. So I'm curious from you, Corey, a little bit more about kind of your living situation. Are you in a house or apartment and family and all those kind of things?
Totally. Yeah, so I'm going to try and make this as not long as possible. Currently, we're living in a house in Illinois. We've been here for a couple of months. We're just renting because we're not planning on staying here long term. That's a whole other story in and of itself. But I live here at this house with my wife, Christiana, and our two girls who are almost 4 and almost 6. There's a downstairs area. There's kind of that middle floor, the ground level, floor 1 or floor 0, depending on where you live in the world. And then there's like a top floor that has the bedrooms and things like that. I'm currently in the basement. So where I work is in the basement level. There's like this utility room with the washer and dryer. And then there's like this smaller other room that nobody's living in. That's kind of just the place where we throw Amazon boxes. And, but there's just kind of this open space down here. So I'm not like in a room necessarily. It's more like I don't know. It probably was used for like the entertainment room, the family room, but I've kind of repurposed it with this little table to be the place where I work. And when Christiana works, she works down here as well. We don't ever work at the same. Well, I should say we rarely work at the same time. But she just kind of hangs out on the couch and works. But we like to have this level be our working level. So that's where we're currently at. I've had different experiences, certainly over the last 12 months in working in different places, but we can get into that in a different time. But that's my current working from home context.
Yeah, currently for me, we are in a single-story home with 3 bedrooms. So I'm here with my wife, Danae, and we have a little daughter who's 18 months old now. So I'm still at that point where I remember what it was like before kids and after kids. So kind of bringing some of that context to the table. Part of what I'm sure I'll touch on in this episode is both before and after having a child. And so that's part of the context of where I'm at. Fortunately, because we have 3 bedrooms and we really only need 2 right now, the third one is my office, and my wife also has her own desk in this office. So sometimes we're working together in here. She's not normally remote working. She's a teacher, so she's normally at school teaching. But right now, because of everything going on with COVID-19, she's working from home as well. So we're both in that work from home position at the moment and figuring some of that out, which has been very interesting. On kind of a side note, just sharing some of this stuff with her and seeing if some of the stuff I've shared helps and that kind of thing. That's been interesting.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where we're at the moment. Yeah, that's kind of the context of where I am. So hopefully that's helpful to kind of get an idea of where we're at. I think a lot of these tips apply no matter where you are, but some of them, of course, will be somewhat specific to our situations. So
I think one of the important things about what we just did was to give a name to what our context is as we work from home. So, today's episode we're talking about minimizing distractions, and I think one of the first steps you really have to do is you have to evaluate what your entire work situation is, right? So, a lot of people don't have um, multi-story houses. A lot of people might just have a studio apartment, or maybe they're in, you know, uh, like I don't know, a tent or something. There's so many different ways to, so many different living contexts and living situations. There you mentioned at the very beginning there are people who are single or are living with someone or living with multiple people, children, no children. Like there's so many different ways. Pets. Oh, I don't have any pets, but we haven't even factored that in. Like, what do you do when you have pets that live at home? And and how does that all work in? So kind of giving a giving having a moment where you can look around your little world that you're going to be working in and giving that a name. So you're like, okay, I will have, here are my rooms, here are the things that are in those rooms. um this one has windows, this doesn't. What are the pros, what are the cons? But it's, I think, establishing what your work context is going to be or what it can be starts by saying what is your home context. And even if you're brand new at working from home or you've been doing it for a while, I think evaluating that from time to time is really important, to really sort out, okay, well, is this the best use of space? Is this the best use of the furniture that I have? Is this the best use of curtains and lamps and yada, yada, yada? Whatever you might have at hand, what are the things that are going to be present so you can start to figure out what's going to be best to help you work your best.
yeah, it's very interesting how your home, whatever that may look like, even if it's an apartment or anything like that. I use the word home kind of without a specific building in mind,
Sure.
but
Sure.
whatever your home looks like, when you start working from home, it becomes interesting how much that space matters. Not that it didn't matter before, but now your entire existence is at home, because in a normal day job of like 9 to 5, something like that, you're spending 8 to 9 hours minimum at work if you're working full time, and so that's a good chunk of your day. That's like what, a third of your day is at work,
Right.
another third is sleeping, and so normally a third of your day is just being at home, and so that's just kind of part of it. But once you start working from home, all of that is at home. And so that's what we want to look at today. And I love that concept, Corey, about looking at your house and evaluating what is it that's around you. And even those little things, like some of that, when you heard Corey mention, look at your lamps. Um, I know that sounds so minor, but just everything in your space matters. And if it's cluttered and it's messy and it's confusing and there's no structure, that's going to be reflected in the work that you do and in the schedule that you keep, and honestly, even in your sanity, like just feeling like you have some kind of control over what's happening.
Totally.
You have to keep control over your space. So I think the first big thing to get into is compartmentalizing your space. Like you said, evaluate what's around, and then find a place where you can call this one space your workspace, and you can call this other space your living space. And that's not to say they never potentially get kind of muddied a little bit. Like there's times where my wife and daughter will come in here to my office, and I'm working on something, and they're just in here hanging out or whatever.
Mm.
And there's times where I work in the living room, and just hang out in there. But having these defined spaces where we know, okay, potentially if the door is closed and I'm in here, I'm working. Having that defined space is really, really important.
Totally. And and if you're living with someone, it's also important to communicate that, to say, um, this is, let's talk about this. What would be a good area, a good space for that would work for the both of us. As an example, I mentioned that I work in the basement down here, and when we moved in, this is just like this little kind of pre-furnished apartment, and there was this table in the washer dryer room that was just there, and it had some stuff on it, and I was like, I need a table, and so I pulled it out and I set it up here, and I found a lamp in some other room and I put it on there, and I found some Christmas light decorations and I kind of like draped it over the back of the table so it's behind my laptop. And so now there's kind of like this little section of the basement that is where I go to work. And I remember as I was setting that up, I was like, I went to go talk with my wife and I said, "Hey, I feel like I've kind of taken over the basement. I've got kind of this section that's mine and has my stuff. Would you like me to, clear off the table so you can work there? Do you want me to like what do you also need?" And she was like, "I like working on the couch downstairs." So that's going to be like you have your space, I'll have my space. It's totally fine. The point is that we communicated about it, right? So if I feel like I'm going to do my best work at the kitchen table and the person I'm living with is like, you can't do that, that's going to freak me out, then you have to talk about that. You got to communicate about that. And I think that's really important for um determining what that location's going to be, and not just diving in and hoping it goes well, but just saying, hey, what's going to work for our family, what's going to work for our relationship, what's going to and this is freed up a little bit, I mean a lot bit when it's just you. But I mean, if you've got roommates, you're gonna have to sort that out. In most cases, if you have roommates and you're sharing a house with people, usually there's like different rooms and things. But then you have, okay, well, what if I only have my room and then the shared space? Well, can you compartmentalize areas of your room, right? Like, so maybe there's your bed and your closet if you have one, and then like there's the corner of the room that's your work thing, right? Like let that be the work area. Let the corner be your work area. Let that be the spot where there's some sort of context switch that happens when you go from I'm living at home and doing life and I'm working. And that stuff is really important, even just like mentally, for getting in the zone of I am now in work. I'm utilizing the parts of my brain that are for work. And I think those things are really important, especially if you have limited amount of space.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I often forget to even mention this in my life for some reason. But there was about a year of time right after college where I worked remotely for a company for about a year. And I was in a one bedroom apartment. So it was one bedroom, a living room, and a kitchen. But the living room and kitchen were all, one space. And then, of course, there was a bathroom. But the living room kitchen was really the only place to go to do much. And so I remember when I first started working remotely, it was so easy to like sit on the couch and start watching TV and working
Yeah,
and
right.
eating Cheerios or whatever, um, like
Yeah.
doing all the things at one time. Um, and that was not healthy. I did pretty bad with that, to be honest. Like I had real struggles with feeling like I had purpose, even though I was working. I had struggles with feeling like I had purpose and that I was going to work. Because I think that's another thing that we haven't really even touched on yet is the idea that other people around you, when you start working remotely, there's maybe not so much right now because COVID-19 has kind of forced a lot of people to work from home. And so I think a lot
Right.
of people have gotten a taste of it and understand it a little better now. But um, there's still a good chunk of people who will say, well, you're working from home. You could do whatever,
Right.
it's like you're at home. So if you're at home, then you can do anything you want to. And that's not really the case, but it's easy to fall into that trap of saying, well, they're right. I'm at home. I could do whatever. And then you just constantly feel like you're at home. You feel like you're unemployed, even if you are employed, because you're just sitting around and you don't have a defined space. And so what I eventually did is said, I was living on my own right after college. I wasn't married or anything. So I decided that the little breakfast table I had kind of by the kitchen, like that was my work zone. I went there, I worked, I didn't watch the TV, I didn't turn anything else on. I sat there and worked. The benefits of being just out of college and, like I, I was right behind the fridge. So
Yeah, there you go.
I could easily just like reach over and grab something out of the fridge. But other than that, I was like separated from my living space. And then when it was time to leave work, I actually had I started to build some rituals for that. So I took all the cups and stuff I'd gathered over the day that were on the table. I put those in the sink, washed them off, left that space, and I went to go sit on my couch and watch some TV or something. Um, and so I just want to mention that because if you've decided that your working space is somewhere that you potentially could frequent, like obviously I'm going to go back in my kitchen. It's not a separate room.
Right.
But in that context, I specifically went to do something else for at least a good hour of time before I went back into the kitchen to have that separation of, okay, I'm no longer in work. Because the other thing that can happen is you're not lazy. You don't feel like you aren't working. You feel like you have to always work. And
Yes.
that's the other thing that happens at work when you work from home. And so having that separation where you kind of say, my this is my commute, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I'm taking this time doing something I enjoy, relaxing, not feeling guilty about it. This is the end of my day. And then you're in home, I'll call it home mode, right? You're like in this mode of living and being at home. And so that kind of separation really helps. And I like something that you touched on when you were talking about your workspace, putting those like Christmas lights or whatever they are on the back of your desk. Like I think that's another important thing when you work from home is remembering that you don't have coworkers to like have fun with, right? And so having something that brings you some joy during the day is great. And
Totally.
it's not like being in an office where you have to keep this like perfectly normal desk situation, right? And so I have these LED lights that I can set to like they're RGB, so I can set them to multiple colors. I can have them flash and strobe and all these things. And so I'm not gonna lie, Corey. There's times I turn on the lights to like strobe mode, and I
Yeah.
turn up some techno music, and
Yeah.
I just have like a party in here.
That's
I mean,
hilarious. I love that.
uh, there's just you got to have some fun during your
Totally.
day.
Yeah, and it's especially if it's going to be at the place where you're going to be, make it your own as much as you can. I also have like a couple of plants, and I know this is like a really big thing that you'll see. Oh, working from home, here are your air plants and succulents you can get or whatever. And the reason why people recommend those is because it adds something to that space. And that's so important. I love, and I think this probably could be its own episode for sure, the idea of rituals, the starting work rituals, the ending work rituals. I was homeschooled growing up, and when there was just the three of us, I'm the third of seven kids, but before there was the younger four, we'd be doing school and everything like that, and we would literally, I don't know, it didn't last very long, but I still have the memory where we were like, we still kind of want to have that feeling like we're going to school every morning. And so we'd wake up, we'd, make our lunches for the day. Mom would help us with that and, get all of our stuff, and we put it in backpacks, and we would walk outside and go to the driveway. We had a pretty long driveway, walk to the end of the driveway, and then like do like kind of some zigzags or whatever, like we were walking to school, and then walk back to our house. And we'd go to school. And that was how we signified that we were going from I'm at my house to I'm at school. And I don't remember that lasting a really long time, but I do remember when I got a little bit older and it was literally just, I'm going to start school whenever and I'll end school whenever I'm done. And there was such a lack of any structure for me. And I think that really hindered my education because it was just kind of blur. And And that is a huge danger that comes from working from home, is this concept of I have to keep working because I've never walked out of context switch mode, right? So when you work in retail or you work in food or you're going someplace, there's always this end of the day moment where you grab your stuff and you walk out the door. And I mean, if you work at Burger King, you literally can't work from Burger King at home, like, so we have to build those things in because they're not intrinsic to our work location, and I definitely think we should have a show on on rituals. I don't know that it necessarily fits the context of this episode, but um, I love that idea though of saying, "Hey, life is life and work is work, and I can get my best work in if I'm in this space doing the work, and then having these times where I take a lunch break, where I take my 15, right, and and you have to build those things in. It doesn't come naturally. You have to build those things in, schedule it even if you need to, because this it's the only way that you're going to have a healthy balance of I'm I'm not always in home mode and I'm not always in work mode.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that about homeschooling and going to school, quote unquote. Um, I had a friend who had I think it was two or three younger kids at the time. And he had just started working remotely for a company. And before that, he had gone to an office every day. So his kids, of course, are used to him. That same thing, those rituals, like those exist for other people. That's something else to remember. Your loved ones, even if you don't have children, if you're living with someone else or roommates or whoever, like they may be used to you leaving for work and now you're not leaving for work. So what he did, I loved this so much, Corey. He told his kids, okay, like daddy's going to work now. And so he'd get dressed, do his whole thing like normal, walk out the front door, and then come back in the back door, and he's at work. And he'd like go to his office.
That's so good.
And
I love that.
And the kids just like, it was funny, of course. They thought it was entertaining. But at the same time, they knew like, okay, that's the moment where dad goes to work.
Yes.
And then he'd go out the back door and come in the front door, and he was done with his day.
That's
and
great.
So it's just this like signaling thing. And so even beyond just your own ritual and your own feeling of what context you were in, remember that there's other people around you. Even if you're, single and it's your friends or someone else, there's ways to kind of signal to them, okay, I'm done with my workday. I'm back into normal mode. I can reply to you. I can play video games with you, do whatever. I'm done with my day. So I think to summarize everything we've been talking about, it's all about compartmentalizing. Compartmentalizing your work and your home life, as well as other things like you mentioned lunch, have a time slot for that, have something you do. Don't get lost in lunch and have like a 5-hour lunch break. You got to keep the focus going, right? But having like locations or things that you do, I even know sometimes for me, what helps me during the day, and I don't do this necessarily every day, but I could see it helping someone every day, is I will have my lunch somewhere other than I have my dinner. Just to like, that's my work lunch, like,
okay.
At a different table or something like, and it all sounds so silly. Like if somebody came over to your house and you're just like, this is where I do this thing and this thing and this, they're like,
I'm on my lunch break. I can only talk to you for about 5 more minutes.
Yeah. And you're there in like your really nice shirt and your shorts, which is that's another topic we got to talk about too, Corey, is work attire. How there is none. You just wear like a nice shirt because you might be on some video calls.
But no pants, right?
Nope. You don't have to wear pants. Okay. I mean,
trousers for the rest of the world.
Yeah. So, anyway, yeah, that's kind of what we're getting at, just that idea. So I guess our challenge from this episode is to go look at your space, look at what you have, talk to people who live with you or who interact with you on a regular basis, and work some of those concepts out. I think we're going to have some other episodes that, well, I know we definitely will have some episodes that go deeper into a lot of these topics, but just at a high level, understanding that you need to have some separate spaces for different things, I think will start to help you feel a lot less stressed, a lot less like work never ends and life never begins. That's an easy thing to feel. So, yeah, I think that's about all I had to share.
Yeah.
Anything else from you, Corey?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say, in context of, you know, kind of the thing that we say at the beginning of every show is this show is about working from home with less stress and more freedom. And I want to address at the very kind of top of this show, so we're in episode 2 here, that having greater structure or having any structure allows for greater freedom when you're within that structure. And I also want to submit that some of these things, I mean, all of these things are very flexible too. Like, you have to figure out what works for you. I know a lot of people who their work from home situation is just really like there's so much challenge with finding these things. And again, it's just about saying, okay, what do I have? What do I have at hand? Is it the little table, right? Is it literally this corner of the couch is where I work? Is it your porch? Is it, what could it be? What is it? And find like what comes from that is a relief of mental pressure. There's lots and lots and lots of studies that have been done about context switching and about focus and what is the brain actually doing when it's in these spaces? What is it preparing me for? And am I sitting at this desk with this? I'll give an example. I often game on the same computer that I do my work on, and I use a different mouse for gaming than I do for work. And I know that seems so silly, but it's this different context. I have this wireless Logitech mouse that I use when I'm working and I'm doing all that, but I have this other we don't have the same mouse, do we?
It's close.
MX Master 2S or something. Not a sponsor, but Logitech, get in touch. Um, but just things like that. Like, what are the things I can context switch with? Is it, I'm wearing a certain outfit and then I go change when I'm done with work? Like, there's a lot of creativity that can come from figuring out what that looks like. And, if I'm working at a table or a big desk, is it cluttered? And is that affecting my productivity? Do I need to declutter at the beginning of every day? Do I just like gather it in a bag and just put it behind me so I can't see it? What are the things that are causing you to not get into it? Like, being able to be honest with yourself and saying, this isn't really working. Let me go someplace else and try that. Right. So you got to experiment. You got to try things out. Like having these lights on, having them dim. You down in the basement, my wife likes to work with the ceiling lights on, and I like to work with just a couple of lamps on. So it's a little bit dimmer, kind of moody, a little warmer, but she likes to have all of the light on. And that's just how, we just work differently. And so you have to find those things that say, or that help you determine what's going to put me at my best when I'm working and what's going to put me at my best when I'm not working.
Yeah, I would say, just to add on to that, find them and define them.
Yeah.
That was nice. A weird way to put that.
I like it.
But you have to define those processes. So if the light, for example, overhead lights, like, that your wife works better with overhead lights on. So the reason you know that is because she's been aware of it, right? So once you find those things that work for you, even if you have to write them down, like, just remember what works best for you and do it every time. Don't switch it up every time. I mean, there is flexibility to switch up things, but I think the more you can, keep things the same, especially at the beginning, if you're just starting to work from home, definitely like keep that routine down of doing the same thing every time. And if one day, you decide, okay, it's rainy outside and I don't want the overhead lights on, I just want to relax, then do that. But having that, it's interesting to me because it's pronounced enough that you know what your wife likes and you know what you like, and that's important. And if she goes to work in your space and you're both there at some point, then find out, what does that look like for both of you? Like, what can you compromise on together? That's been something my wife and I have been working on recently, because her desk is now in the same room as my desk. And there are times where we work together. We fortunately still have a toddler, so she takes naps. And so
Yeah.
there's times where we're working together, or even in the evening after she goes to bed, we may do some work then that we need to do where we need to have lots of focus time. And so what does that look like? When can we both be in the same space? When should we not? Like, having those conversations with people is important. And I don't know, just really defining things and making sure you know what works. You're aware of what works best for you,
Yeah.
not just trying it, thinking it's fine, and then doing something different the next day.
Right.
Start to figure it out.
Yeah, I'd say if you're gonna try anything and then maybe change it, give it like 2 weeks. See how that goes. Like a week or two, maybe 3. I don't know if there's any science behind that, but most of what I have read about, if you're trying to pick up a new habit or you're trying to adjust something in your life, try it for a couple of weeks before you make any changes, just to see how that works, because things aren't going to change even just physiologically in your head, in your brain, overnight. Like, these things take time. It takes time to adjust. It takes time to figure these things out, and a lot can happen in that time too. So you might say, you know what? I thought I would really enjoy working with headphones on, but I just cannot get focused while wearing headphones. I like, it just can't happen. So I have to have no headphones on. And so other people are like, I need the best noise canceling I can, because if I hear anything, I'm done. and
Yeah.
and you just have to figure that out for yourself. So give it a couple of weeks. I think that's really good advice, is to give it some time, Kyle, before you just, jump onto something new. That doesn't mean you can't like add or subtract things here and there. If you're like, you know what, I just don't think this is working, then you can remove that or change or whatever, but give each space its time to prove itself in a way, So I think that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. And if not just for yourself, also for other people who live with you or interact with you. If you have someone who lives with you, a great example of this is the room that I'm in. I'm in a spare bedroom in our house. And over time, there's certain times where I need to be super focused. I don't need any distractions at all, because I just can't handle it. And so my wife and I have just established, if the door is closed to the room, that means text me or something to see if, if I can answer texts, I'll have notifications on and I'll respond. If not, then, I won't respond maybe for a little bit. But if the door is closed, that probably means I'm super focused. And obviously, if she needs me, she can go through the door, like if it's an emergency or something. But we try to keep that kind of system. So if it's open, like walk in, talk to me, whatever you want to do, I'm not super focused. But if it's closed, I'm in that focus mode. And so even that, as simple as that sounds, that took some time to become a response, right? So there were times where I'd have the door closed and it's like she walks in and then goes, oh, sorry. Forgot that means you're focused,
Right.
So
right.
like, it takes some time to warm up to those kind of things. And even with your friends, if you just have friends that are not even with you in the same spot, like Corey and I are not in the same location, but there's times where I just have like, do not disturb on. And we know that if we message each other and we don't respond right away, it's fine. We're probably working,
Right.
because we don't know our work schedules. And so just having that kind of like having that conversation with friends and family of like, sometimes I'm in work mode, sometimes I'm not, but I'll get back with you when I'm not in work mode. Even that's going to take a little time to build up. So
Right.
I think you're definitely right, Corey. Giving it like 2-3 weeks or so, 2 or 3 week trial, so to speak, is a good thing to do.
Totally.
All right. Well, that was a good show.
I liked it. I think it's good.
I think that gives some clarity to some of this. I hope it doesn't make anyone feel overwhelmed. The main goal, I think, out of all this is to define a work and living space. That's like step number one if you're if you're just starting to work remotely. If you've been working remotely for a while, hopefully some of these things about like rituals and some of that, which I agree with you, Corey. I want to get into that more, but hopefully that sparks some ideas for you as well. You can find all the episodes and show notes at commuteless.fm. And you can also get in touch and ask us questions at commuteless.fm/contact. Corey, where can people go to find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Cory D.H. Miller, Cory. And you can find me at my development blog, CoryDHMiller.com. And then obviously at Commuteless.fm is where we've got all the stuff. So what about you, Kyle? Where can people find you?
You can find me at It's Kyle Adams on Twitter, and that's ITS Kyle Adams. You can also find me at kyleadams.me. I do think we'll eventually have maybe like an official Twitter of some kind for people to share things with us. But in the meantime, if you're listening to this and we don't have that Twitter handle yet, feel free to send something over to us on Twitter as well, or even through our websites or whatever. Just chat with us. We want to find out more about what's going on with you, how you're feeling about working remotely, working from home type stuff. Anything you have questions about, ask us. And we're happy to help you just in general, and also hopefully help other people by using that to create a show with. So just reach out to us, let us know what's going on, and we want to help. So that's the main goal here.
We would also love for you to go and leave a review. So in iTunes, the way that the show gets in front of more people in the feeds is by obviously downloads and then also reviews that are left. And so we want to help as many people as possible and get the show in front of as many people who are looking for this type of content. And so we would really appreciate if you would go, if this episode has been at all valuable to you, if these shows, if the concept of Commuteless is going to be helpful to you, we would ask that you go to commuteless.fm/review. And we're thinking of doing maybe like some links there in the future and maybe a secret episode. We haven't really figured that out yet, but if you go to commuteless.fm/review, you'll go to either a portal or be forwarded to iTunes, to Apple Podcasts, etc., etc. I don't even know what they call it anymore.
Apple Pods.
Apple Pods. Yeah, you go there, and if you would leave us a review, that would be really, really incredible. We'd really, really appreciate that.
Good show.
Good show.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.